It goes to the Nevada border, so it's really inland in California. And a lot of people know about Barstow. They pass through Barstow to get to Disneyland. So that is in our mission, Barstow, and there's a couple of other like far out little cities that aren't like hugely populated. And then as you kind of get farther southwest, it'll get a little bit more city-like, but nothing crazy like LA. There's not a lot of public transportation or anything that you can take in our mission to contact people or do things like that. A lot of it, you just have to be walking around on the streets, and you just find people at their houses, really, is kind of how it works. The nearest temple is in Redlands, and you get to go, at least while I was there, you got to go twice a year. Once in September, and then the other time like sometime in the summer. So that was really nice. Without traffic, it's like a 40-minute drive. With traffic, it's definitely a lot more than that, but it's pretty easy to get from one place to the other. It's not super far. The farthest someone would have to drive is maybe 2 hours to get to a meeting at the mission office or something like that. So in our mission, we have two separate parts. We call it the valley and the desert. And in the valley, there are tons and tons of Hispanics, Latinos, a lot of Asians, lots of Koreans, and Filipinos. And then when you get higher up into the desert, the other part of the mission, that's where you run into more like African Americans. There was only English and Spanish in our mission, so those were the languages that we covered. And there definitely is a lot of diversity in California, which I love. I love that. I miss it a lot, actually. I had a ward where there were tons of Polynesians. There was someone from Turkey. There was just people from all over, from Tonga, Samoa, those places. And they just add such a vibrant, like, different spin on things. We could always have really fun meals. You could always count on that. There were definitely a lot more people. So my town is 2,000 people. And to them, that's like minuscule, like you don't even exist if you have that many, people in one place. So that was definitely different to see all the people. It wasn't like a huge culture shock. I didn't really feel like I had a huge culture shock going to California. Probably except for the traffic, just to see how many people are on the road. Like, that to me was amazing. I was like, wow, this is insane. And their freeways are, like 8 to 10 lanes and like different things like that I was definitely not used to. So most people have a religion. We ran into quite a few. There's a lot of Catholics. There are also a lot of like born-agains or like non-denominational religions. But most people did have, somewhere they went to church. Like, I would definitely say there's a lot of religious people. There were a lot of, like, more local churches, kind of, like Calvary Chapel was a big one that we ran into a lot. And there's one called the High Desert Church. So if you're in the desert part of the mission, then that's really, like, where a lot of people go. We just call it HDC. And so, but it was really good to realize that there's a lot of amazing people that aren't members of our church that still strive to do their best. In one area that I served in, I lived with members. I actually ended up living with members my whole mission, and I loved it. And so I lived with these members for 7 months, and our neighbors were Catholic, and they were just amazing people. The members we lived with kept saying they were trying to convert them. They've just given a Book of Mormons. They brought them to church. They've done so many things. Always have gospel discussions, but they're just not quite there yet. But it was just really good to see them through God's eyes, even though there's pieces of information that they were missing, but to see that they're still really doing good in the world. And I don't know, that was really exciting for me because I wasn't really around a lot of different religions growing up. Or if I was, because I had friends that weren't members, but we wouldn't really talk about it. I don't know, missionary work wasn't like a focus for me growing up, so that was good to see that part. We get fed every night with member dinners, and I learned to never say no. I never said no. So if anyone said, do you want dessert, do you want this, or even if we were just contacting someone, people were always really nice. The first summer I was there, I didn't have a water bottle the whole summer. And it was fine because we would go knock on people's doors or we would talk to them and they wouldn't be interested, but someone would always be like, well, do you need some water? And the first time it happened, my companion, my trainer was like, yes, we want some water. So we went into their house, we got some water, and then we left, and, maybe probably like 10 minutes later, we ran into someone else that offered us water. And I was like, oh no, we're good, we just had some. And my companion was like, no, yes, we want some. And I was like, I'm not even thirsty anymore, I just drank a bunch of water. And she's like, you never say no. And that's probably one of the first lessons I learned that I definitely stuck to. Like, all my companions will testify that I never say no. So I had to go to the bathroom a lot. I felt like I lived at the church because we would always stop there, or that was a good way to get into less active homes. I did that a couple times. And there was one time that this couple was walking across the street and it was starting to get dark, and so me and my companion didn't want to be out tracting, so we were gonna get in our car and try and go find some other people to visit, maybe someone in the ward we didn't know or something like that. And they started talking to us, and they had just sold their house and they were preachers of another faith and they wanted to pray with us. And so we got in a circle and we all held hands, and it was a pretty interesting prayer. I've never heard one quite like it. There was a lot of hallelujahs and a lot of amens. It was really loud. So it definitely was a different prayer than what I was used to. So me and my companion, we were both pretty new at that point. We had both only been out for like 2 months when we were together at that time, and so that was pretty new for both of us. She was from Idaho, I was from Utah. That was definitely a new experience. But it was really fun and something that we both always comment on, always remember. I don't think that my personality changed on my mission. I had a cousin who went and he came back and was a completely different person. Not that he was kind of mean, but he just loved to argue and would just egg people on before his mission. And when he came home, he was very different. I think he saw that there wasn't really a lot of purpose in that. And he still does a little bit, but definitely not to the extent that he did. And so I was kind of expecting that for myself, to have this huge personality change. And it didn't happen. I'm pretty much the same, still the same. But I definitely think the thing that changed for me was my view of the gospel. And I think a lot of missionaries would say that just understanding the depth of it and their relationship with their Savior definitely changed. And I think I really understood why I needed to pray every day. That's why I would say for my advice to understand the importance of the primary answers, because I feel like that is something that I learned on my mission, that if I had known already, I think I could have, shared stronger testimony or just not struggled with other things and gone further. So, but I definitely think that that's what I learned the most, was I saw the importance of going to church every Sunday, of really preparing yourself to go, because there were times that we would hurry and rush and go, and I didn't get a lot out of sacrament meeting. But when I would prepare in the mornings and I would go, then it would really spiritually uplift me, and I could think over things that I had done, that I had heard at church throughout the week, that would really benefit me. And I think I really saw why we need to go to church and why I need to read my scriptures, like why that benefits me. And I could feel the happiness that comes from fully submitting yourself to the gospel. And so then you can see when you're not doing that, you can feel the difference, and you can kind of start to gauge where you're at spiritually, because you know what it feels like to be completely invested and to really feel like you are listening to the promptings and that you're doing what God has asked you to do. So at the very end of my mission, I was put with a companion that I really didn't think I was going to get along with. She was really opposite from me. She was very into fashion. She was her job before she became a missionary was to cut hair. Like, she was just very into that, and I am not. I put my hair in a braid every day of my whole mission, just like threw it back in a braid. If I could, I would wear gym shorts and a t-shirt every day. So luckily, wearing a skirt feels like gym shorts if you get comfy ones. So that was a bonus. So I just was really intrigued to see how this would go. And a lot of other missionaries would ask us if we were getting along, because just looking at us, we don't look like we would get along. Like, we just have very different views. But we did. She became one of my greatest friends. Like, I love her, and I love that she reminds me, like, she's very different from me, but that people are different. They have different views about the world, and that's okay. And we can all live the gospel in our own way, and that it's definitely up to God to judge where they're at spiritually. And so that really helped me with teaching people. And I just thought of an amazing experience that I had. So my first birthday on the mission, I had this secret goal of getting a new investigator. Like, we were in an area that it was hard to find people to teach, and I was like, God's gonna bless me on my birthday with someone to teach. This is gonna be so fun. And it was like the worst day of missionary work I've ever had. Like, it was awful. The best part about the day was that my zone leaders brought me a watermelon with 20 candles in it, which was pretty amazing, actually. And it was a pretty good watermelon. But that was the best part of the day. It was just not good for missionary work. So a year later, me and this companion I just talked about, that we were very different, but we got along great. We were in the car going to dinner with some members. We'd kind of planned it out because I was going home in 2 months, and I'd been in the area for a long time, so I knew a lot of people. And so we were on our way to dinner, and we got a phone call from someone, and he said, "Hi, sisters." And we're like, "Hi, who's this?" And he's like, "This is Sean Miller, and I was wondering if you would teach my wife." And in the car, we're just like, yes, we would love to." And he said, "Perfect, like, when can you come over?" And I was like, how about tomorrow? And they're like, "Okay." So we got a phone call to start teaching this girl on my birthday. And so we went to go start teaching her, and she is like one of the most amazing people I've ever met. Her name is Denise, and she had been going to church for 2 years already with her husband and his family. His family lived close, and she was just so ready. We didn't have to set a baptismal date. She set her own. And at first I thought, this person, she doesn't even need the missionaries. She already knows. She's been going to church for a long time. She doesn't really need us to talk about faith. And so we're just going to just speed through these lessons. She's going to get baptized, and she's not even going to remember us. And she actually became one of our greatest friends. Just the connection that you can make when talking about the gospel is amazing. It's something, creates a really solid friendship, because you learn a lot about a person when you talk about the things they believe, because the struggles they have come up, and the struggles you've had come up, how you gained your testimony, and as you just share things from the scriptures together, it became obvious that we were going to be friends. And I was really excited about that, because I didn't think we were at first. And so that was definitely an amazing experience. And I learned, like, she definitely has some different views than I do about some things, but that doesn't mean that they're wrong. They're just different. And that was a really cool experience for me. I had a companion that got bit by a dog. That was definitely an interesting experience. She went down to pet it and got too close to its face. It was just at a member's home, and it bit her in the lip, and she was hysterical. Like, it was, and she's a dog lover, and luckily the lady that we were at her home, she was a nurse, and so she kind of worked her up, and we called the mission nurse to see what we could do, and we had to get pictures taken to send to her so she could send to someone else to see if she needed stitches. Missionary phones can't do that, and the members that we lived with, they were gone, and so we went to our ward mission leader's house. He was gone, but his son was there, so we got a picture, and then we were actually staying in another city for the night, because we couldn't stay in our home for a reason, and so we had to go to the other city and stay. And then when we got there, they told us we needed another picture, but we once again didn't have a phone, so we had to drive to the ward mission leader's house in that city, in that area, and get another picture taken. Turns out she didn't need to get stitches, and if you look at her now, you can't even tell. The most amazing part about that experience was she was really hysterical, just really crying and had a hard time with that, and we asked our zone leaders to come and give her a blessing, and she calmed right down. It was amazing. I mean, she definitely was still in shock about the experience, but there was a huge change in her, and so that was amazing for me to see the power of the priesthood there, because for me growing up, I'd only had like 2 priesthood blessings my whole life. I've never really, I've never gotten them really just before starting school or different things like that. We didn't do that at my house, and so I don't know, it was just definitely a huge testimony builder. I've always been pretty friendly, mainly because growing up in Monticello, I already knew everyone. Like, I was raised in primary with all these kids. So making friends was never really something that I had to do. And so when I went to college for a year before my mission, it was like, how do I do this? How do I make friends? How do I make connections? And I've always been really weird in big groups of people. I'm pretty good one-on-one because I feel like, I don't know, there's just less distraction going on, less things to worry about. And so I feel like now, though, I can better appreciate when, for example, when I had my homecoming, I was really nervous to have all these people there to listen to me, but I felt like I was a lot better at going around and talking to people and thanking them for coming, and just talking people randomly on the street, or at people that my cashier when I check out, my groceries, like things like that. I definitely feel like I'm better at getting to know people and for making friends, because I definitely had to work to do that on my mission. That was definitely a struggle, something I really had to work on the whole time. I kept thinking like, oh, in 6 months it'll be easy, and it never was. But I got used to doing it, and so it was still hard, but I was prepared for it. And I knew that if I talked to people, then I would be happy as a missionary. And so that's kind of what drove me to do it. Also, the fact that I knew that I needed to, that helped too. But so I definitely feel like my social skills are better. I'm like better in different situations and different things like that. So I was brand new to this area, and we went to go teach a family that was a yours, mine, and ours of 6 girls, all under the age of 9. And it was insane. It was crazy. Those girls were everywhere, up and down, all over the place. And so finally the parents just told them, like, go in a different room and we're gonna learn. And so we would teach them, and it was fun because my first lesson I was really nervous. I want to get to the point where I know that person and they know me, so that the lessons are more comfortable, they flow, but I had just been transferred. What can you do? So I was there, and I specifically remember as I was teaching, we were just teaching about the restoration and going over prophets, how God gives us prophets. And I just remember saying things that weren't coming from me, that they were definitely coming from the Spirit, coming from God. And the man that we were teaching, he said exactly what you dream of your investigator saying. And it was like, well, if God called prophets then, when we read about them in the Bible, why wouldn't he call them now? It just makes sense. And so that was really exciting, and to see that even though I didn't know these people, that the lesson could still go smoothly, that the Spirit could still work through me, even though we didn't have that relationship quite yet. And later, this couple ended up getting baptized, and their girls a couple months after that. And it was an amazing experience that the husband that I was talking about, that's talked about prophets, after he was baptized, we asked them when we were preparing the service if they wanted to share their testimonies after they got baptized. And both of them were like, oh no, we don't want to do that. Keep us out of it. And so we didn't put them in because we wanted to respect that. It's their baptism. We want it to mean the most to them. And so, by impromptu, after they got baptized and they came back out, the husband stood up and bore his testimony about the Book of Mormon, and how he knows that if you ask God to help you understand the scriptures, that you'll be able to. And everyone walked away feeling very spiritually uplifted. His testimony was just amazing. He truly understood what it was about. And it was cool to see a couple months later he was able to baptize 3 of his daughters. And that family has since been sealed in the temple. So it's been really rewarding. Another lesson I think I learned was that you just need to do what you know you're supposed to and not worry about anything else. So at the very beginning of my mission, we were having a really hard time finding people to teach. And so this was the area I had my first birthday in, where I didn't go so well. So we were just really trying hard to find people to teach. And it was amazing because it wasn't even us that did it, but there were some members that ran into someone at the perfect time. They were able to make a connection with him and invite him to church. And he is one of those golden investigators that just latched right onto the gospel. It came when he needed it. His favorite part was the plan of salvation, and it was amazing to see his name's Ernie, and he has the spiritual gift of having faith in others' testimonies, I think, and having faith that there's answers out there. He had a friend that was a less active member of the church that one time asked him a question, well, what about this? What about this? You're looking into this church, and like, I went, but I don't do that anymore because of these reasons. And instead of allowing himself to be shaken up by that, he just said, I know the answer is out there somewhere, I just don't know what it is, but I know I can find someone that knows the answer. And to me, that was amazing. He was an amazing example of not letting different things distract you from what you feel. Because our lessons with him were really amazing because he was ready and he was prepared. And it's amazing that we didn't even find him. It was members. But I know that God blesses us when we do what we're supposed to, and that we learn the lessons that we're supposed to. Missions are definitely individualized for each person. Just talking to my companions, the different experiences that they've had. And a piece of advice I think I would give to anyone serving a mission is to do as much as you can when you first contact a person, because you never know if you're going to see them again. There were a lot of times that we would contact someone and we would leave them with maybe just a card and we would share our testimonies, and I thought like, oh yeah, we're going to see them again. Like they were really positive about reacting to us, and then we would never be able to catch them at home again. And so I think not throwing up the gospel on them, but if there's an opportunity to share a little bit more or to leave a testimony, then you should definitely do that, because you don't know if you're going to see them again. My go-to was always, when in doubt, testify. So when you're first out, or even later when you're teaching lessons, if you don't know what to say, you can always bear your testimony of what you know is true. And I think one of the most powerful things I did was maybe like once every 6 months, and maybe it's probably different for everyone, I would ask God if the Book of Mormon was true. And he would always come through and always tell me that it was. And so I always had this renewed testimony of the Book of Mormon that I was able to look back on, that I could testify of, that it wasn't something that happened a year ago. It wasn't something that happened, when I was 15 or at the beginning of my mission, that it could be a more recent testimony that I could share. I am very emotional when it comes to the gospel. The way that not always, but usually the way that I feel the Spirit is accompanied with tears. And I was in an area, and we had knocked on a door randomly. We went to go see someone, they weren't home, and so we're like, oh, let's pick a random house, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, here we go. And we met this woman named Monica, and we had a really positive first interaction, and so we kept going back, and it was really hard to catch her at home. And then finally, one day she wasn't going to come to the door, but one of her little girls was like, Mom, there's someone at the door. So she kind of felt like she had to, because now we knew she was home. And so she came to the door, and she told us that she had just gotten out of a rough divorce like 2 days before. And you could tell she didn't want to talk. And so she just shut the door. And as I walked away, I was in tears because I knew that the gospel could help her with that. I knew that if she strengthened her relationship with Jesus Christ, that would help her get through that experience. And there was so much love that we could offer her, but she wasn't ready. And so that was really hard for me. We actually had to take a break after that because I just kept crying, and my companion was like, we can't proselyte like this. So we went and took a break. I think we got some ice cream. But that was really hard to see the effect that it could have on someone, but the timing wasn't right. And so that was really hard. And there was another woman that we taught that her husband wasn't as invested into the gospel, but you knew that she knew it was true. From just the things that she would say, she was definitely in tune with the Spirit. And it was hard to see that, one, they weren't together on that decision in their marriage, and so it didn't happen. It still hasn't happened, even though I know that she knows it's true, and I think she also is not quite ready to give up the lifestyle that she's living. And so I think that is hard. And one more experience that I had was, it was at the very end of my mission, and I thought, this is it. This is all I have. So me and my companion worked so hard to find people to teach. I've never worked so hard, and we had no results. And that was hard because I felt like this is the only time I've given so much effort, into really finding. A lot of times we were trying to, I don't want to say I didn't work as hard my whole mission, but I definitely felt like my focus was just really there to find new people to teach, to really improve the area that I was in. And when no results came, it was really confusing to me. And it's one of those things that I still don't completely understand. But I wouldn't change the way that my mission ended or anything like that. But that was definitely an experience that I had to really ponder and pray to Heavenly Father to kind of understand, to be okay with, to make sure that He knew that my efforts were enough. I have grown up listening to people share about their mission experiences and how amazing it was. And so I remember going out on my mission and thinking, when are those experiences going to happen to me? Because it seemed like for a really long time, nothing ever happened. I thought, what am I going to tell my family this week in an email, Okay, don't have anyone to teach still, or different things like that. But one of my favorite stories to share on my mission was of when I had to get up early in the morning, and I'd set my alarm for some odd number, like 5:42, and that night when I was kneeling to pray, I told Heavenly Father, and it came out of nowhere, I've never said this before, was please help me wake up on time. And I'm a morning person, and so waking up at 5:42 would not have been a big deal to me. And it was amazing because my alarm, for some reason, did not go off that morning. But I woke up at exactly 5:42. And so I didn't realize that's one of my favorite stories about prayer that I have, that God cared enough to, one, put that thought into my head to pray to wake up on time, and that it actually happened. That God cared enough to get me there on time to where I was going. And I didn't realize that this was such a profound spiritual experience for me until like 4 years later. And so the advice that I would give is to be patient when you're waiting for those amazing experiences, where someone just can't wait. You got to hold them back from jumping in the baptismal font, right? You always think of those kinds of things. That don't be super frustrated when they don't seem to come right away, because one, they will come. You just have to be patient. And two, a lot of the experiences you won't realize are spiritual experiences until you're looking back. To those of you who are just getting your call or getting excited to go to the Rancho Cucamonga Mission, as you can see, it holds a special place in my heart. It's amazing to to go somewhere for me that's so close to home. I can drive there in 12 hours. Maybe it might be a little shorter than that. And that is a huge blessing because the people you meet, you will never forget them. And they impact your life for the better. You can see their examples and you become really good friends, really close with them. And so it's amazing to go back and visit, and it's definitely a fun mission to say, to go to Rancho Cucamonga, and just be ready for hard things. But when all is said and done, you'll remember the good things. It's hard for me to talk about the hard parts of my mission because I don't focus on those anymore now that I'm home. I just remember feeling the Spirit as I taught, and not every single lesson was extremely spiritual and powerful. Not every single time did I feel the Spirit testifying through me. But when the people I taught, when they needed it, then the Spirit was there. And you can learn so many different things from so many different people. Never be closed-minded to different ways of life and to different ideas. The thing that I love most is that you never stop learning. There are things that I learn now that I think this would have been so good to know on my mission to share this with people. One, I can still do missionary work now, so I can still share it. But two, that you can't get down on yourself for not knowing everything. But make sure that you take those special hours in the morning to study, to really take advantage of that, because it is an amazing time to be able to study for other people. I miss that a lot. Miss having a purpose as I study. I do study for myself, but it's not the same. And you really get to know the ins and outs of the gospel and go with the flow with the things that happen. If you're a sister and you get called to be on a bike, which may or may not happen, but if it does, run with it. I wanted to do that my whole mission, and I'm really sad I never got called to ride a bike. But we grow from every single experience, and it doesn't matter where you serve. And lucky for you, you're going to Rancho Cucamonga. But it's an amazing place, and the reason I feel that way is because I served a mission there. I would definitely feel different if I was just visiting or working, but a mission changes you, and it changes the people that you teach. And I leave that with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Recognize the significance of the primary answers. To just read your scriptures and pray and go to church. Those three simple things. Because I feel I did not do very much to prepare for my mission. I just kind of was like, hey, we're going to go, we're going to do this. They stopped doing mission prep when I didn't take it as a class when I was at college, and they stopped doing it when I got home for the summer, which doesn't make any sense to me, but they weren't doing it, so I went to like one day of mission prep. But I still felt like I was prepared because growing up, my family read the Book of Mormon every day before we went to school. So that kind of transferred over with me when I went to college. I took Institute, just tried to be invested in my spiritual well-being and trying to get something out of church. I think those things are what can really help you. You know, I think reading Preach My Gospel would be good, but in my opinion, it doesn't mean as much to you until you're a missionary. You don't feel the power of it until you're a missionary. And you have plenty of time to get familiar with it. So I would probably say that, and memorize the first vision. That one would be really good, actually, because I remember going and my companion was like, so, do you know this? And I was like, I probably haven't even read it, actually, in the past, 5 years. So, and that's my favorite thing to testify of, is the story of the first vision and the power that comes along with Joseph Smith and his experience. And so that is the advice I would give to someone preparing to go on a mission.
It was created out of a couple of different missions in 2013, so it's not very old at all. It was mostly wards. There were a few branches. I served in one of them. I served in a YSA branch down in the valley for my last transfer, but mostly it was wards. The town I served in mainly was Hesperia, and it was actually settled and established by Mormons. I had a convert take me down a street one time to this abandoned lot that had a bunch of rocks in the middle of it, and there was this plaque that talked about how it was established. It was the Mormon hotel that was in the town, and that the entire place was established by Mormons. So that was really cool to see. I didn't really serve down in the valley of my mission. It was kind of separated into two areas. You had the desert and the valley. We were called the desert rats and the valley cats. It was great. But I know the desert was established by them, but it was separated because it was so different. You had down the valley, you had Snoop Dogg had a house in our mission. I mean, it was rich people usually that, or at least more financially sound than was up in the desert. And up in the desert, you had the gangs, you had the drugs, you had the small houses, you had just everyone spread out. Where in the valley, everyone was just on top of each other and everyone's business, all that fun stuff. It was like two different worlds, honestly. We took pictures when it rained because it was so rare. It rained maybe 4 times while I was on my mission in the desert area. In the valley, it rained all the time. But it had to like go over the mountains, the clouds did, to get to us, and it never did. So it was very rare when it rained. Snowed maybe once a year, but I never saw it. I wasn't there for snow. And other than that, just dry, hot desert. Food was basically normal. There were a few times I ate with some Tongan families. There's a lot of Tongans in the area, especially down in the valley. And that was some interesting food. But other than that, it was pretty normal, pretty simple stuff. Lots of tacos. I had tacos probably 5 times a week for dinner. Weirdest thing I ate on my mission was probably pickled pig skin, which actually really wasn't that bad. Some of the death members gave me that. My mission, because of being reassigned a language and because I had so many companion changes, I only had one companion that lasted more than one transfer, and because I stayed in one area for so long, it was a little bit different than a lot of other missions, or what missionaries experience, but I absolutely loved it. I was in an area that was very, very high in poverty levels. I was in the desert of California, and lots of gang activity, there was a shooting outside my house one time. There was lots of marijuana, lots of drugs, lots of people that didn't really have a grasp on life, honestly. And it was amazing to see those people, because you think of that kind of thing not in the United States usually. You think about it in third world countries, but it was almost like you were in a third world country and then you'd go down the hill to go to a mission conference and you were in a completely different world. It was crazy. And being a missionary to those people, they were so humble already, most of them, when you met them, because they didn't have anything. You think of California as this super rich place that has a bunch of money, and it wasn't that at all. It was, I might have enough food on the table. Dinners we went to was usually Hamburger Helper, and that was awesome. Like, it was amazing to have a pork chop. Like, that was an amazing experience, just to like have something so commonplace to us and our families usually. And serving them and teaching them, they were so avid to learn something that they had never heard of that would improve their life so much. And not improve their life financially or improve their life and in those kind of ways, but improve their life to where they knew that they were loved by somebody and knew that the violence and the drugs or whatever they were struggling with wasn't the only life that they could have. One of the men that I was able to teach and be there for his baptism, he is actually one of the head gang members of one of the gangs in Hesperia. Like, it's amazing to see the transformation that these people have to go through to become converted. But when they are converted, they will never leave it. They're so rock solid strong. And that was such a blessing, because I have a roommate, and she has so many converts that she taught that have fallen away from the gospel, and I haven't had one. I mean, it's just amazing to see the difference in these people, because they were so humble and so ready for it. The deaf people I taught were all Hispanic, which was really interesting. But most everyone else, all the English-speaking people, were generally Caucasian white, which was a weird barrier in of itself. But I served in an English ward that had about 10 deaf members in it. So I worked mainly with English people. But the English people, they were amazing. They were a little crazy. They had their own way of thinking, which is everywhere. Everyone has their own way of thinking. But they just had their own little world that they lived in. I don't know how else to describe it. And they knew that about themselves. They knew they were different. They knew that they were a little bit off their rocker sometimes. Different people were, but they loved that about themselves. So it was interesting to witness. There was one family in particular that I remember. She was less active, and he was investigating the church. And he was a complete country boy, wore his boots to church all the time. Like, he was awesome, and I loved him. And he served us great Southern food, which I missed from Texas. But everyone that I met wanted to be 100% sure of what they were doing. They didn't jump into anything. They took their time. They were very patient with themselves, sometimes a lot more patient than we were, because we knew that they were ready to be baptized. And they were like, no, I'm not ready yet. I need to make sure I'm 100% on this. And I didn't understand that until one convert named Woody, and he kept us going for months, and we didn't have anything else to teach him. He would read the scriptures for 6 hours a day. He had almost every manual memorized. He knew exactly what he needed to do. He had some word of wisdom issues, and so we just kept teaching him that, basically, and saying, you're ready to be baptized as long as you do this. And one day we went and we were going to give a word of wisdom lesson, and he said, oh, I'm done. I already quit coffee and tea and smoking. I quit all that 2 days ago. I was like, oh, okay. And his wife had no idea. He hadn't planned on telling us. He was like, it just came up, so I'll tell you, but I wasn't wanting to. It's like, it's my thing. I told you I would decide to do it one day, and I did. And still, he wouldn't get baptized, even though he was done with this. He wanted to be 100% sure that he wanted the gospel and that it was right for him. And that's how everyone was. They wanted to make 100% sure. And it's different in that way, but it's awesome. So when you're a sign language missionary, you get different books, different videos, and that kind of thing to help you learn. But the best thing is just to jump in. I started my gospel sign language by interpreting church my first week in the mission. I mean, you just have to learn as you go. But you are given the tools that you need. And for me, at least, I got an hour every day to continue to learn, and I would watch and I would interpret what my companion was saying all the time. And we made it a rule most of the time to sign in our apartment, because it just helped me. And my companions needed to learn it too. They needed to learn the easy stuff, at least. So I would help them and teach them, and that helped me a lot. So finding deaf investigators was something that was really difficult. Really, what we had to do was everyone in our zone, all the missionaries, were just on the lookout for anyone signing. And if they found anyone, they would tell us where they saw them, because they couldn't communicate with them to see where they lived or if they were even interested. So they would tell us, and I would go find them. I would have to hunt them down, basically, is one way we found investigators. Another way is that we would, of course, be in contact with the members, the deaf members, and say, are there any friends that you have that would be interested in joining the church? It was interesting because most of the time we would go hunt someone down, and a few times the deaf members in our ward were at a party at their house that we'd hunted them down. So they all knew each other, which was really interesting. But my favorite story of how we found a deaf investigator is my companion and I on Monday, so our P day, our day off, we're at Old Navy getting her a dress because she needed one. And she saw some deaf people signing in the checkout line to each other. And she's like, Sister Treadwell, we need to go talk to them right now. And I was like, no, they're busy, like, it's okay. She's like, no, we're talking to them right now. And she ran out of the store after them. And so I, of course, have to run after her. So we drop all of our stuff on the counter in the checkout line and run after them out of the store. And explain who we are, all this stuff. They didn't hear us coming because, or running up to them because they can't hear. So we just showed up behind them. So it wasn't creepy or anything that they knew we ran out of the store after them. But introduced ourselves, and they said, yeah, we'd love to learn more. We'd love to talk to you later. And so we told them where the church was and all this stuff because they didn't have phones because they were poor. And so we're like, okay, so hopefully they'll come to church on Sunday. Didn't come to church on Sunday. A few weeks later, we go to one of our deaf members' houses, and the two deaf people that we had talked to were in the garage fixing his car. And so and we saw them like out of the corner of our eye, and my companion gets up again and runs to the garage to talk to them. And she can't speak barely any sign language, so I have to run after her. And we started setting up lessons and had them at that member's house, and that was really the furthest I got with an investigator was with that family. And they were amazing. I don't know if they got baptized. I kind of doubt it because there was no sign language missionary after I got transferred. But it was really cool to find people by running out of an Old Navy. For me, it was a little bit different than other sign language missionaries, I think, just because I always had a companion that didn't know sign language. So I was usually the interpreter. So my companion would teach the lesson and I would interpret it, because it's really difficult to switch back and forth between the two languages. Just like it's kind of difficult to sign while I'm talking. But almost all of the people that I taught were Mexican. I had one, I don't know the sign, Guatemalan. Woman that I taught. See, it's hard. But I don't know, it was amazing to teach the gospel in sign language because it's so much more simple. I mean, the apostles have said that this is one of the most simple teachings in the entire world, but putting it in sign language it makes it so beautiful and simple and just perfect, because you can't explain huge difficult concepts. You have to focus it in and make it's the easier it is to understand. Most deaf people don't have a advanced reading level. About 3rd grade is all they have. And so I was teaching a man one time, and he was reading the scriptures, or he was trying to, and he got to a word, he got to the word atonement, and he didn't know what it meant. So I had to try to describe to him in sign what the atonement was, and tell him that the atonement was Christ dying for us and suffering for us so that we can have eternal life. Him taking upon himself the responsibilities and all of the sins of the world so that we can live with him again. And then he understood it. But this was a man that had been a member of the church almost all his life. And he was about 50 years old. And he didn't know what the atonement was. And that was amazing to see, just how these people were members of the church but had no knowledge of the gospel. And so I worked with a lot of the deaf members, not with a lot of investigators, because these people had never really had amazing interpreters in church. They didn't know the gospel at all. So I had a couple of baptisms that I participated in and taught people for on my mission. Not a lot, but I didn't have one normal baptismal service. I had one for a hearing little girl of deaf parents that I had to interpret, and her dad was doing the prayer, and he signed it wrong, and I was the interpreter. And my bishop and ward mission leader freaked out and started yelling at me like, "Did he say this? Are you sure?" No, he didn't say, "Okay, we need to redo it." He had to redo it 4 different times before his daughter finally was able to communicate with him what he was missing and exactly how he was doing it wrong. And his daughter was 8 years old. But I had that. I had a man who had where you have the hole in your throat because of cancer. He had that, and his dream was to be baptized, and we had to go through this whole thing of how can he be baptized, because if he gets water in that hole, then he's dead. So he had to go face forward while being baptized. We had to have 2 people in the font, one of them being a doctor. We had to take a lot of precautions for that one. But it was awesome because his wife, who didn't approve of him joining the church, actually, she didn't like it, but she was fine with it, stood up and gave a standing ovation when he was finally baptized, and he was okay, which was awesome. And then I had one. This is Woody. He was 6'5", maybe. He was so tall. And the man that was baptizing him, his knees locked up while he was under the water. And so he had to drop him in the water, and he had to get up himself so he didn't drown. I had no normal baptisms at all. But it was amazing because even though none of them were normal, none of them went as planned, all of them were still amazing, and all of them had such a sweet spirit there, and all the people, no matter what went wrong, were still so glad that they went through with it. It didn't matter how many people showed up. I had one baptism where no one showed up, which was very sad. But it didn't matter who showed up, it didn't matter what went wrong, they were just so glad to make those covenants with the Lord. I taught a few crazy people, mentally diagnosed crazy, which was very interesting. I had one woman that forgot us as soon as we left and forgot everything we talked about as soon as we left, but our ward still wanted us to teach her, so we went over every week and taught her the exact same lesson. It's just, sometimes you gotta follow what the ward wants. But I served in an area with a lot of fun stories, but every mission will have fun stories. And every mission's going to have some crazy people that you teach and have some amazing people that you teach that want to get baptized the next day. I mean, it's all amazing. Sign language is a very visual language. So a lot of times there's not signs for what you want to say, and so you have to describe it to the best of your ability and make a sign almost for it that is understood by you and the deaf person. They obviously can't hear doorbells, so you're lucky if you find them outside, and sometimes if they're okay with that and you know them and they know you're coming, just walking into the house almost, just because they don't know you're there. Make sure they know you first, though. That would be creepy if they didn't know you. Deaf people are basically the same as a lot of other people. They just can't hear. Their reading level isn't as great because they don't really understand English most of the time. So they don't understand a lot of words. They may not understand signs you're even using, because I could sign atonement, like I said earlier, and this man still didn't know what that meant. And so I had to teach him some signs. And you'll have to do that with the gospel. You can't just assume that they know all the signs they're using, even if they just nod their head, because they're still learning their own language, just like we're still learning English. When I hear a word I don't know, you have to describe what that word means. And other than that, they're just amazing people. Some of them try to talk while they sign, and they end up screaming while they sign. Sometimes I had companions that it was hard for them not to laugh at that kind of thing. Try really hard not to, because it can be offensive, because they are really trying to communicate with you. They realize that you're speaking a completely different language and that you're learning their language. It's not natural for you. And so most of the time, once they know that, they're really forgiving. They know you're not native to speaking ASL. They're going to be okay with taking it slow, having to repeat things, especially when it comes to finger spelling. They'll go really slow for you if you need it. Once they figure out that you may know a little bit more, they don't slow down for you. You're expected to keep up. The only other thing about deaf people is sign language is different wherever you go. Almost every city has a different form of sign language, depending on where you grew up. The northern states have way different sign language than the southern states. And some of them, because they moved around, have mixed it all up. So you have to figure out what signs they know and sometimes use different signs until you get it right for them. Where I live, I've met a lot of people down in Texas that are deaf, and they use completely different signs for a lot of things than the people in my mission, than my professor that's deaf at BYU. I mean, all of them use different signs. My BYU professor said I used to sign to Texan for him. He didn't like it as much, so I had to figure out what he liked and what signs he wanted me to use. And then I went to California, and they were like, no, you've been signing California wrong your entire career of learning sign language. It's not this. Oh wait, no, it's not this. It's not this. It's this. Get it right. And so there's just those little minute changes that once you get right for that person, they get so much more comfortable with you, because they can see that you're trying to accept them in their culture, but also them personally. So the most important lesson for deaf people was the very first thing that we're told to talk about. And that is that we have a Heavenly Father that loves us. That is the most important piece of information that you can give these people, because most of the time they feel isolated. They feel like because no one can understand them, that no one loves them. And it's amazing to see that when these people are told that you have a Heavenly Father that loves you and knows you personally and individually, that they automatically feel the Spirit. They know that is true, and it's something that they've never thought about before, because they thought they were alone, or they thought that they were in this little bubble of their family and friends, and no one else even knew they were here and existed. So making sure that they understand that not only do you love them and truly love them, but that Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ love them is I can't stress it enough, the most important thing. In complete desert, no trees or green anywhere. There were things called Joshua trees, and that was really the only plant life you got, because it cost so much to water a lawn. And if you saw someone with grass, you knew that they were a little bit more financially stable. But just a little tiny town, wasn't tons of hills. Everyone had at least an acre yard. It was really spread out. Train tracks just going through the main part of it. You had little tiny restaurants, but nothing really big. You had to go to the next town to get a grocery store, all that fun stuff. Very small, no big houses at all. It was all little tiny country homes. But everyone was, for the most part, pretty friendly, which was kind of cool. You could wave to people and they would be totally fine with it, and you could start up a conversation. It wasn't, why are you talking to me? Or it's not okay that you're talking to me. Everyone was pretty friendly. I got a back injury on my mission, and it was fine, but I didn't go to the doctor because it really wasn't that bad, I didn't think. And then I got transferred to a new area after about 6 months and finally went to the doctor. The doctor said he would be able to fix me, and so I let him because I couldn't sit for about more than 20 minutes. I had a sprained tailbone. And he tried to fix me and he wasn't able to, and actually kind of made it worse. And I got to the point where I couldn't sit at all. I had to go to the doctor every day for steroid shots and inflammation shots and all that fun stuff. And so I called my mission president's wife, actually, because I didn't want to disappoint my mission president, and told her what was going on. And I got a call a few minutes later after she had talked to my mission president that said, "You're probably going to have to go home." And I cried and bawled for like 3 minutes straight in my room, just alone. And then the most amazing feeling of peace that I have ever felt came over me. And I remembered a line from my patriarchal blessing that made it all okay. And I knew I was going to go home. I knew that I would not be coming back. And I knew that I had done what the Lord needed me to do. And that my mission was complete. And that I was going to be released honorably because of that. And it's not a spiritual experience that a lot of people see or experience. And that's okay. A lot of people don't need to. But it was what I needed. And I'm so grateful for that, because even so many missionaries that come home early don't get that. And they're so confused when they come home because they have no idea why they're home. They don't know why the Lord, so-called, is punishing them, which He's not, but they have that mentality almost of, I was supposed to serve this 18 months or this 2 years, and now the Lord's not letting me. And what did I do wrong? What could I have fixed? They blame themselves a lot of times. And I don't know, I was supposed to come home early for my mission, and there's so many reasons why I was supposed to come home early for my mission. And if it hadn't been because of my back injury, it would have been for another reason, because I was done. And I know these interviews and these videos are for preparing to serve. And I think it's just important to remember that even though you're told in your mission call that you're going to be serving for 18 months or 2 years, you need to make sure before you go that if the Lord changes your plan, what you had set in your mind that you were going to do, that it's okay. There's a talk by Elder Bednar where he's about to give a blessing to a man that's dying of cancer. And he says, "Before I give you this blessing, do you have the faith not to be healed?" And I think it's important to ask ourselves before we even leave on our missions, do we have the faith to not follow our own plan to serve for this 18 months or 2 years if that's what the Lord needs us to do? being a sign language missionary is very different. It's a lot of different rules. It's a lot of different experiences. Because usually you're completely surrounded by a different language, in my case English. And the Lord has such a love for these people. He loves deaf people. And they go through a lot of challenges that you and I can't even imagine, that may seem so small to us, but are huge. And serving as a sign language missionary can be difficult because other people also don't understand what you're seeing in them. Because as a sign language missionary, you start being able to pick up a lot on body language, a lot on their emotions that your companion and others can't see. You see how much they struggle in the gospel. Because the gospel isn't easy for them. It's not easy for them to understand. It's not easy for them to live a lot of times. Just like other people, it's not easy to live, but it's hard growing up in a religion that you've been in your entire life and yet you still don't understand it, which is what a lot of deaf people go through. And being a sign language missionary is you're advocating for them. You are their voice. And that's a lot of responsibility, but it's something that is so amazing. While I was there, I was able to interpret bishop meetings on almost a weekly basis for these people. I was able to help their English-speaking ward know them more. I was able to interpret a wedding. I was able to interpret a baptism. I was able to help these people progress in their lives just because I could understand them. You are such a gift to them, and it's a rare, rare gift that they're able to communicate fully with the people around them that they want to love and want to know better.